let's get started. So first of all, hi everybody. My name is Lauri Borén. I'm a creative director at Reaktor, and my background is in product design. So I've been building, designing and building software in teams for most of my career, and yeah, very excited to be here. I'll just say a couple of words before we get started with the panel discussion. So first of all, thank you to Consulate General of Finland for partnering with us with this event and hosting us tonight. It's a great space, good place to be in, and very festive. So yeah, thank you. Second, a couple of words about Reaktor. So we are a technology consultancy. We help our clients build and design digital products. We are about 50 people here in North America, about 700 globally across cities, Helsinki, Tokyo, Amsterdam, Lisbon, and New York, and other parts of North America, a few other cities. Yeah, we partner with our clients, help them build their digital products. Brands you might have known, HBO, for example, Adidas, Tommy Hilfiger, Paramount, Delta Airlines. So clients that are big, but also clients that are a little bit smaller than that. And yeah, that's Reaktor in a nutshell. Tonight we'll have a panel discussion about accessibility, and not just from the design perspective, rather than something that is maybe relevant for everybody who is participating in building digital products, making decisions on like whether it makes to invest in accessibility when these things are being built, and also like us all as humans and users of different products. Accessibility is something that will, if not now, then eventually touch on all of us. The panel discussion, I believe, is going to be on two different levels. So first, why should we be focusing on accessibility in the first place? And then the second part is how. So what do people who are on different teams building products or making decisions about accessibility, how can they make sure that the world is moving to a more accessible direction? We have some great panelists with us here tonight. Simone, Soren, Gopal, thank you for being here. And the panel discussion will be moderated by Mira from Reaktor. And last thing, thank you everybody for being here. Please don't be shy, ask questions, participate in the conversation. Say hi to the person sitting next to you, and yeah, we're all in this together, so welcome and enjoy the evening.
Thank you.
All right, so good evening again, and yes, thank you all for coming here tonight in person or remotely. Warm welcome to our panel discussion on embracing accessibility in product design and development. We're, by the way, going to have a Q&A session towards the end, so you can save your questions, either put those to the chat or ask here if you're participating in person once we get our panel discussion first. A little bit background before we jump into the panel discussion. My name is Mira Myllylä, and as Lauri told, I'm a designer at Reaktor, and I'm joined here by these amazing accessibility experts and advocates who we've asked to come here to share a little bit about their knowledge about accessibility. The reason why we wanted to organize this event is that we haven't done enough. There are 4% of websites in the world that are accessible. And accessibility is nothing new, but still we're in the situation where so many people are being left out. So I think what we believe in is that our goal should be to increase the product quality and the ways of working so that more people can be part of creating and using the products and services that we create. By the way, is my mic working? Good. So again, that's why we have you guys here tonight. Thank you so much. I also want to give my gratitude to our friends at UNFPA for their help and collaboration in connecting us with some of our amazing panelists here tonight. But who do we have here? First, let me introduce you to Simone Jenerson, to the very left. She's the head of product accessibility and inclusion at Aon, who works closely with strategic roadmaps, vision and execution of assessment products that support diverse user needs and help make better talent decisions. She understands what's it like to work on the very grassroots level where the changes are being made, but also how to go beyond what we should do and focus on the real life settings that determine what needs to be done. Next up, here in the middle, we have Soren Hamby. They are a senior manager of UX and digital design at Benjamin Moore. And in addition to their background in web design, Soren is currently studying Masters of Arts of Disability Studies at the City University of New York. They're passionate about how to incorporate different levels of knowledge, capabilities, and desires that different teams have on accessibility. So they must have a lot to say of how we can take that into account when working in a team setting. Last but not least, Gopal Mitra, to my right, who's a global lead on disability at UNICEF headquarters, where he provides strategic and technical leadership to deliver on UNICEF's global commitments on disability inclusion. He has also led the disability inclusion team in the executive office of the Secretary General and worked on implementation of the UN Disability Inclusion Strategy. He's going to provide us some insight on disability inclusion, inclusive humanitarian action, assistive technology, and of course, accessibility. So we have pretty much a powerhouse panel here tonight, and thank you again for joining us. I'm sure we will all learn very much from all of you. As Lauri mentioned, we will have two main themes that we'll be discussing today. We're going to start by talking about why and how accessibility is our responsibility as digital professionals, and move on to talk about how to build a better ground for implementing it in practice. So a little warm-up question, although going straight to the deep end. What are the most common challenges with the teams, clients, or organizations that you work with? Meaning, what's the most common challenge for them to get buy-in regarding accessibility? Simone, do you want to start?
The most common challenge to get buy-in. I think, honestly, I think accessibility, it is similar to UX for those that are, in the room and are UX professionals or understand UX adjacently. It is trying to understand the importance of it, why we should ensure that an experience, be it an accessible one or otherwise, is an important topic to lean into and to be intentional about and to be thoughtful of in all stages, from conception to post-production. So, ask me the question again. So I can get more to the point.
So what's the most common challenge for them to get buy-in regarding accessibility?
Yes. So the challenge is just understanding that it is a thing to focus on, period. And it's not an add-on. And we understand that it's not an add-on. It's not something that's a compliance issue. It's not something because we're being sued. It is an experience. It is a part of the experience, not some separate experience either. It is the experience, period. And we need to focus on it just for that reason alone.
Thank you. Soren, want to go next?
I'd love to. I think part of it is there's this set of lived experiences that we kind of view life through, like lenses of a camera, and you have your own set. There's nothing wrong with that, but it only allows you to see what's within those lenses and focus on certain things that are within your frame of experience. For instance, before I was experiencing a visual disability, I didn't know what it was like to live with a visual disability. And I purposefully work with teams that have diverse backgrounds so that I can have those kinds of spots that I don't know about covered. So like, I don't know what the immigrant experience is like. I don't know what it's like to live without internet or with really slow internet as an adult. I don't know what it's like to not have an ATM in my town. So things like that are places where people just don't even think of the implications of the technology that they're building because we live in our own bubbles sometimes, and we're all guilty of that. So I think, just like in UX where we have to check our cognitive biases, we have to do that with accessibility as well, and we have to listen to the people that are most affected by it. And I think that's honestly the biggest challenge with user experience is that we have to be mindful of that we're not building for ourselves, we're building for other people. And that it's not a separate experience, like Simone said. It's the experience of the people that we serve. And we're not the voice of ourselves, we're the voice of the user. So I think just awareness is a huge part of it because people don't see it as part of the center of excellence of coding or the center of excellence of design. And that's what we're here to change. We want it to be part of an excellent product. There's no MVP without accessibility.
Thank you, Soren.
Yes.
What about you, Gopal?
And what is the scope and the magnitude of the issue when we talk about the people that we serve, our customer base, or the communities that we live in? Here we are talking about a significant part of the population, right? 15 to 16% of the population are people with disabilities. And that translates to about 1.2, 1.3 billion people in the world. Includes 240 million children with disabilities, right? If you see the data from the World Health Organization, it says that 2.5 billion people use one or more assistive devices or require glasses, hearing aids, assistive software, wheelchairs, right? And with an aging population, this number is going to go up to 3.5 billion by 2050. Now that's big numbers, right? Could you hear what I said? Okay. Thank you. So these are big numbers. And we know that accessibility is the fundamental precondition for inclusion. We have just heard. No accessibility, no inclusion, period. It's not the only thing, but the most fundamental thing, right? And so if you put these two together, the scope, the magnitude of the issue, and the importance of the issue, there is only one thing. It absolutely is the right thing to do, but it's not only the right thing to do, it's also the smart thing to do, because then you have 2.5 billion to 3 billion people who will be able to interact better with what we all are doing and what we are trying to do, right? So I'll stop there.
Thank you. Yeah, that's definitely an impressive number, and we can all agree that it's a huge part of people.
And I
that
bet
we're
you didn't
talking
know
about.
that this was an assistive technology.
Yes, that too.
That's a whole other thought that I have for much, much later.
Yeah. I think my next question is yes, we recognize that accessibility is important and it's part of product quality, and there's no inclusion without accessibility. But still, as mentioned earlier, 96% of websites are inaccessible. So I'd like to hear, in your opinion, why do you think we're still lagging behind? And maybe, Soren, would you mind starting?
Sure. I think part of it is that we don't have buy-in. We don't have support, and we don't have a robust product team to support accessibility. We don't make it part of that center of excellence. So if we don't require people to be accountable for the things that they make, and we don't require that things are coded well and they're also coded accessibly, then people aren't going to do it. If you don't make it part of the job, then people aren't going to do it. It's then a volunteer effort. and nobody wants to do more than their job. They don't want to volunteer to do more work. So I think, we have to create the time and space for people to learn. We have to create the time and space for people to be wrong and the psychological safety to learn. And I think that's a huge part of it, because in tech, there's this big conception about being right and being good and being excellent. And when you walk into a space and you tell developers that have been developing for 10, 20, 30 years, hey, you're doing that wrong, they don't want to hear that. And that's the way a lot of people in accessibility sometimes come across, even if that's not what they mean. And that's sometimes how it's received, even if that's not what's said. So I think sometimes it's the approach and it's the messaging from the company. It's about creating a culture that supports accessibility and that values it, and not just, oh, that's a little compliance box that we checked. Oh, we send it to legal, we send it to accessibility. Accessibility is the fabric of everything that we do. Yeah. I'm sure you have more to say.
Oh yeah. That was golden. In the creating the culture, I think is also holding on to the culture that exists. I want to believe, and I'm going to believe, that everyone in this room cares, or else you wouldn't be here, right? Mm-hmm. So you are probably not the anomaly. I'm sure that there is another person just like you or similar to you in terms of care as it relates to, them doing accessibility within their domain. So you're doing it in UX, they're doing it in dev. Somebody else is doing it in some other place along the digital products. The creation is also holding on to the culture that already exists, the people that are already doing that work. You're finding your tribe amongst the various people within the chain of digital product creation and banding together and creating accessible products. So I think that's an important thing too. Just kind of want to dovetail on something that you said, which was, yes, that culture of, I call it perfection without practice, which is that part that you mentioned where there's no psychological safety. It's, we must get this right, the end. We get paid to be right, the end. No, yes, but no, we also must have the space. You didn't become master developer from the womb. Like you took time to, hone your craft and practice and doodle and perfect. So too is with accessibility. In fact, I want to believe all of us here, we had to practice in our crafts of accessibility and our craft of inclusion. We had to learn it from somewhere to get here in front of you. So too are those that are trying to understand where do we start with accessibility, and or how do we coalesce around a group of passionate, interested people who want to do the right thing, but for whatever reason haven't been able to up to this point. So I think those are some of the things too that feed into that.
You want me?
Yes,
Okay.
Go ahead, Gopal.
And as UNICEF, we work across the world in different settings, low income, humanitarian, different settings. And when we talk about accessibility, I call them the 3 or 4 myths that exist that because of which people do not do it or don't consider it. The first myth, I think it's accessibility is too expensive, right? We are working on tight budgets. It's expensive. It will require a lot of money, but we know it's not that. I can come back deeper on that later. The second myth is there are very few people who will need this, so I can afford to ignore it. And I'm talking about places where laws, legislation, enforcement are not that great, right? I can do without it. The third is there are very specialized set of people who can do accessibility. It's not my job. I'm a regular developer. I'm a regular tech guy, It's not, but there are specific people who do accessibility. It's not for me. It's not in my portfolio, my domain. It's seen as a very unique, specific piece of work if you are doing programs, projects, some solutions for people with disabilities, only then you need to consider it, otherwise not. And I call them the 3 myths because they do not stand to the test of evidence, But these are, apart, in addition to what you all said, which are absolutely spot on, in different contexts, we also see these. In humanitarian situations, for example, we see that the thing that, it's life-saving, all our products, digital products are used, or, physical products. We are trying to save normal children, quote unquote. So we are not being able to save them. Disabled children, oh my God, let's talk about it tomorrow. Yeah? And when the whole world went into COVID and learning became remote, you can imagine the implication that it had over 15-20% of the population who could not access it, the digital learning environment, the messaging around COVID, and because it was inaccessible, right? So that is the implication that it had.
Thank you, Gopal. And yeah, it's actually, that made me think of also research that there's from 2018, the number of people with disabilities in the workforce has increased from 29% to 37%. The most progress since the start of the pandemic in 2020. So this example is just one of the examples of the increased opportunities to work from home. And as you mentioned, we've had to learn our way to make it better and easier. But are there any other changes that you have noticed in your field that signals that we're moving towards the right direction?
Well, I've noticed that we are actually hiring more. I'm starting to see job descriptions with accessibility in the title, or if not in the title, certainly as a part of the responsibilities that are expected. So that's nice. Though, I will say, don't wait on that title. Be the rogue and just go head on and just include it on in. But it's nice to see it. I think some other changes too is conversations like this are happening more. Now, I'm not going to say that I've been a part of this space for too long. You check my resume, you're going to see, listen, what are you talking about, lady? But it's more part of my common feed than some specialized place that I had to go hunt and peck and find, right? And that's nice. That this is becoming more part of the lexicon and the consciousness. And I think that the more that it is a part of the broader space, then, clearly it becomes a part of the water cooler talk. It becomes a part of, the everyday conversation within company that, you don't have to fight so hard being that one rascally rabbit that's like, hey, accessibility, no, wait, we're all talking about it. So what you're saying makes sense, So I think those are some 2 good indicators, at least from a workforce situation that are emerging and exist and seems to be escalating in a positive way.
I see a lot of people talking about the difference that addressing accessibility earlier in the development process can make. We've seen a lot of people that have used accessibility as kind of a bottleneck resource. So you get to the end of QA, and then QA has done all of their checks, and then they send the finished product over to accessibility. And that's a very backwards way of thinking about things. One, because it's really only retrofitting a UI, right? You're saying, let me take this thing that was built for, whatever samples that we tested it with, and let me kind of shove accessibility back onto it like a poor fitting cap. And what we really need to be moving towards is more mature accessibility models where we're thinking about it in the service design, we're thinking about it when we're hiring people, we're thinking about it in our education, our processes. We make it a part of our vendor selection. So it's this holistic idea of accessibility operations that really permeates through every role, and it's specific, it's timely, and it's very measurable because you give each role a piece of what their responsibility in accessibility is, and you make everyone responsible. So people in procurement are responsible for checking vendors. Copywriters are responsible for making sure that the text is, at the level that it needs to be so it's understandable by people that have cognitive disabilities. They're responsible for writing alt text. So you don't put it all on the design team, all on the development team, or all on a bunch of accessibility professionals. And then your accessibility professionals become coaches. They teach someone to fish people. So we are then the people that are cheerleading accessibility and advocating for accessibility and making sure that we have support from the C-suite and from the vision and advisory committees and all of that kind of stuff. We get to do that because we're hyped about this. Like it's stuff that we love and we get excited about. And then everyone else, you can be not as excited, but it's still part of your job. Right. So then it doesn't fall on the people that are excited, and then we don't get burnt out. I think that's another big part of it, is that when you put everything on a couple of accessibility professionals get burnt out. There's not enough of us to shoulder the entire weight of accessibility. And a good number of accessibility professionals are disabled people. So then you're also saying, hey, disabled people, you're responsible for creating your own accessibility, essentially. You're responsible for solving this problem that the world has created of ableism. So anyways, I was up there.
Taking that thought further, I thank God nobody told me build your own house. But I totally agree, and we definitely see accessibility, the awareness on accessibility. Even if you take some of the most difficult countries in the world, context-wise, the Somalias and the Afghanistans, we've seen accessibility across the board. Awareness is far more than what it was even 7-8 years back, right? We are really seeing changes, as we are saying, even in low-income countries, least developed countries, more and more procurement contracts, digital procurement contracts, including a component of accessibility right from the tender stage, or development of the tenders. We see more and more people trying to address it. For example, at UNICEF, we have an amazing initiative, conventional textbook. A conventional hard copy textbook is not accessible to a large number of children with disabilities. So accessible digital textbooks is something that we have been working on. There's quite a lot of interest and uptake on that. And the point is that, that we have to realize, as Mira said, you see, 4% of websites are accessible, right? So over the last 5 years, we have seen a lot of improvement. So, but we have started from a very low base. So even after you make 500% progress, it goes from 1% to 5%, And that's an issue. And the point is, it requires all of us, each one of us, and that relentless conscious effort if we want to really make it all pervasive and visible, right? Otherwise, the starting base is so low, even if you make 1000% progress, it's not going to show up in the lives of many significant proportion of the population, right? It remains in pockets otherwise. Yeah.
Thank you, Gopal. Yeah, as we heard, we need some passionate people who are going to kickstart the process. And I'd like to know next, what do you think, how we could support these passionate people who are already putting the efforts into accessibility? How can we make sure that their efforts are taken into action?
That's a big question. I'm going to start in the idealistic space, in the happy path space, where you have an environment. We can make that hyper-local, where you have a manager, right, that understands, at the very least, what we're all talking about here, what we're all came to hear about. Creating that space, you talked about that earlier, so creating that space to learn. But I think also, too, actually putting it as a part of responsibilities, putting it as a part of definition of done, putting it as a part of what our normal operations are, our normal expected outputs and expected expectations are. In doing it in that way is how you can accomplish, answer the question which was asked. I think, and that helps with that. Ask that one more time. I always have like 2 or 3 things going on
It's all
in
good.
this head.
So how we can support these passionate people who are already doing the job.
There you go. So that way it's not that one person that's doing it, but it's spread out amongst others whose job it is to just create products. How about that? Other than that, I think that I know this might be anecdotal, and I'd love to actually hear from my panelists here, my peers, where we're passionate and we're doing all of the things, and we're doing it with limited resources. And by resources, I'm not meaning a whole lot. Can we get training? Can we get time to go to things like this? Can we be immersed in the populations in which we are servicing? Resources, right? Like when a developer or a development manager comes to their senior management and says, listen, we are trying to upskill and learn a new language or learn a new tool in order to deploy the things we need to deploy or write the code that we need to write, there's no one bats an eye. Sure, we've allotted resources. We did that a whole year ago. I was waiting for you to come here. Please, thanks, take that. Not 100 people, but 60. Go. For us, it's like, and you're making the case for what now? What? No! We need resources and tools and things to do our jobs. And it is hard enough to educate and advocate for the program, for the project, for the topic, without having to advocate for ourselves personally. And no, I'm tired, and take this Reddit, go read that, because you know what, I got other stuff to do. I don't have time to do this. So resources as well, for not just the program or the project or the individuals that we're trying to help as passionate people, but resources for our own selves, so we can continue to be fueled and continue to learn and continue to provide that passion that is expected of us, since we've put ourselves out there as passionate people.
Thank you. What about you, Soren?
So I'm going to take the less idealistic, more practical approach here. One of the things I'm really passionate about is design systems, and design system and coded components can be a really, really powerful tool for development teams to dig into accessibility. When you tell a developer, now you have to become good at accessibility, I'm sorry, you've got to learn this new thing. It's a huge, huge topic. Learn everything. Okay. But if you say, hey, I need you to work on form fields, and I want you to dive deep into this documentation that Soren has wrote for you on form fields, and then I need you to code these components, then you know that every single component that has a form field in it is designed accessibly, it's coded accessibly, and it's documented accessibly. So then when you go and you revisit it, accessibility is written into the documentation for how to use that form. And so by breaking things down into smaller pieces, you take some of the overwhelm away from everyone else. You take some of the overwhelm away from us, the passionate people. And you're kind of shifting it into just smaller, more digestible bites. One of the things that I've done is start to create what I call swipe files for definition of done and definition of ready. And anytime that somebody's working on something that has to do with, let's go back to form fields again, there's criteria that is pulled directly from the WCAG guidelines that says, here's what you have to consider. And so it's already there. It's in a spreadsheet. All they have to do is just go to that tab and copy it and paste it into a Jira ticket. So they don't even have to know the stuff. Memorizing those guidelines does not actually help you be good at accessibility. empathy, learning to learn, and being flexible helps you to be good at accessibility, and learning to be wrong and say, I guess that didn't work. And that is a really hard thing to learn. I would say, like, as a more senior designer that got into accessibility, I was like, wow, so many of the things I was doing was so wrong. Like, I'm embarrassed to put this in my portfolio now because anybody looking at that goes, oh, that's not accessible. Right. And I'm guilty of it. Everybody's guilty of it. And we all need to do better. And I think, like, being able to own that and say, it's okay to make mistakes, it's okay to be wrong, and I'm going to make it easier for the person that comes after me is the best thing that you can do to support others, even people that aren't really, really passionate about accessibility.
Amazing. I think amazing points have already been said. On top of all these things, it really helps if there is leadership buy-in and commitment, right? That what we have seen, the pace of change, including and mainly on issues like accessibility, it really speeds up when the leadership is behind it. The messaging, internal and external, is done in a way that it values accessibility and resources are allocated. These are some recipes in which, through which accessibility we have seen getting accelerated.
Thank you. I was just about to ask, what about the role of leadership? But you got me there. Yeah, I would be interested in hearing more about the learning part that we kind of started here already. You also mentioned the web content accessibility guidelines that kind of work as the base for the regulation here in the US, also in Europe. And yes, it's a very scary list of 86 criteria that we would need to memorize. And even besides those like more technical, functional accessibility features, there's still so much more. And as you said, like the empathy part of it. So I don't know, where can people start if they're new to the topic, and how could we make that information more accessible if people want to learn more?
So I think that it's really great for people to become more familiar with the topic of disability justice, of accessible tech as well, of like products that are accessible, but also of assistive tech. So like until I started using like orientation and mobility cane, and I had no idea what it was like to use that. Like I had no idea what it was like to use VoiceOver before I had to use it. And so I think that people have these conceptions about the technology that we use as people with disabilities, that they kind of also think that like, oh, VoiceOver testing or screen reader testing or keyboard testing, that's for the accessibility professionals. That's for the accessibility testers. And testing with people that have disabilities is so important. I can't stress it enough. But I think it's also important that you understand it as a professional. Like even just exposure through social media, watching how people use like Braille keyboards on their phone has like completely changed the way that I looked at how people use technology and how they navigate the world. And I don't think you can understand through like a simulation of like putting a blindfold on and wandering around a room for half an hour or any of these other kind of like empathy exercises, what it's really like to have a disability and like the frustration that comes with it, the barriers that come with it. I don't know if like you can really get the feeling of like walking into an airport bathroom and not knowing where to go. And it's just like, it's so different to have a disability. And I think that the exposure to that experience is just so important. I'm sure, Gopal, you have a lot more to say about that.
No, you hit the nail on the head. Like, I think the exposure, the experience, the empathy that you get when we interact or we have people with disabilities in our amidst us, in our midst. And that's the reason, it's so important to have people with disabilities as part of our workforce. And what I would like to say is people with disabilities are a very diverse group. Yeah, people with diverse sort of impairments. What is accessibility, as with Soren or me as a blind or visually impaired, is totally different from someone who has a cognitive disability, someone who has who's deaf, right? It's totally different. I mean, for a blind person and deaf person, the accessibility is opposite, because I hear and touch, and that's how I feel, and the person who is deaf does it visually, right? So, and those type of, and it's not theory. The moment we interact with people, we have people with disabilities in our midst. We have people with disabilities as part of our workforce. We interact regularly with them. We create those spaces where that interaction can happen. I think that's one way to get it, and the way in which you cannot go wrong. Because what you learn is from near sort of lived or first-hand experience. Yeah.
I mean, absolutely. I think what we're talking here about is dignity, independence, and living life in a very full way, being your full selves. And how do you and or those that you're creating for do that? That's what we're talking about, period, full stop, right? And so to deny that through ignorance, be it intentional or unintentional, is a disservice. It's a crime. It's a lot of things. And so that empathy is the starting point. We get that here. Okay, we all understand that. So, and they did a beautiful job of explaining that. Once you're past that part, or once you're immersed in that part, I should say, because you don't go past it, you're experiencing it. Once you see it, you can't unsee it, as someone I was speaking with said earlier, that I was talking with. You can't unsee it. The start, I believe, is starting with what it is that you do. And I challenge that idea of, bad accessibility is worse than no accessibility. It's a paralysis, that kind of talk. I think in the culture of learning, in that spirit of learning, if you are a designer, how are your design specs? How are they communicating accessibility, be it through annotation or otherwise? If you're a developer, how are you doing good code that allows for a screen reader or keyboard navigation to traverse your site? If you are a UX researcher, how are you including those voices? How are your findings communicating what you understand from the inclusion of such populations? Wherever you are, you start there. And then the next stage of that, though you didn't ask, is getting the partnership, as mentioned earlier, of other passionate people in the domains in which you can take. If you're in the more conceptual phase, i.e. UX for that matter, how do you bring that into the development phase? If you're in the development phase, how do you ensure that QA, at wherever you are, further up and down the pipeline, how are you getting your comrades who are also similarly passionate about this topic? How are you ensuring that either it's getting developed and or once developed, that we don't repeat the mistakes that we just spent all this time, learning ourselves out of, or repeating the things that we unintentionally did not understand before, and now we do. So how do we be better? But I think in doing those things, from the empathy to starting where you are to building that camaraderie and working together to build those a more accessible digital product, that's how you start. And you continue to iterate in those learnings. You continue to iterate, which is not uncommon to the folks in this room, on the product in and of itself. And I think one part that we don't normally talk about, but the post-production, the post-deployment, what is the feedback? Now we must keep an eye on that feedback. Now we must understand what are the tickets that are coming out. Because I'm gonna tell you something, if you're learning, you're probably producing crap. I'm just gonna say it out loud, okay? And that's a part of learning. I'm not saying that to disparage anyone, but if you are learning, you're gonna make mistakes, right? So now you must talk to your service people and say, listen, we put something out and we deployed something. We were trying, child. Okay, we were trying. We're doing our best. I need you to flag these tickets, okay? I need you to flag the tickets that people are calling in, they're typing in, and they're saying this is crap, because we're going to get better from that, right? So it's the post-deployment as well that you start to focus more on as you're in this environment of learning, so you can iterate and get better.
I think you make a great point there, which brings up something I like to say a lot, which is accessibility isn't a checklist and it's not a destination. You can't arrive at accessibility. It's like a workout. You got to constantly be practicing it. And once you publish a page and it's accessible, guess what? There's another page tomorrow. There's new content. There's another app. It never ends. And that's sometimes scary and sometimes wonderful, because our job is never done. So that job security, but also, there's always new challenges and new technology coming out as well. So as we start folding new technology in, how do we do this for all this new technology when the metaverse comes in, like an AR and all this other stuff? How do we make these things accessible? And I mean, I don't have all the answers for that, but I want people to be helping me figure that out. So that's why we need more people to be even just baseline knowledgeable about all of these topics, so that we can have people to collaborate with and say, hey, yeah, we're going to help you figure this out. How can we make this accessible? Because it's impossible, like I said, for us to memorize everything or know everything or anticipate everything. So that's where that collaboration comes in, and just committing to being part of that journey and saying, yeah, we're not perfect, but we're striking out on it. And I think that fear of failure sometimes holds people back from doing something really great.
Do you have something to add, Gopal?
I think it's fantastic. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Gopal.
All right, so we've talked about the motivation for accessibility and the reasons why we're here today and why we want to advocate the topic, and got some tips on how to cut information to smaller pieces, offer the education, build the empathy, educate people, understand better. We're nearing the end of the panel, so I would like to hear in about 30 seconds, what is the main message that you would like the audience to take away from this discussion here today? Simone?
Well, I think you heard a whole bunch. Start where you are, find your tribe, iterate again. It's that simple. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, you said 30 seconds. That's it.
Thank you. Soren?
I would say accessibility has to become part of everything that you do, people, processes, and your products and platforms. So that's 4 Ps. Hopefully that'll be easy to remember. But yeah, it's just got to be part of everything. If it's part of the fabric, then it's the outfit.
Oh, Jesus, you're coming with the gems.
Yeah. And just to complement, in the journey of accessibility, even small steps would have huge impact on the lives of many, many people, right? And the cost of exclusion is far higher than any investment in terms of time, energy that is done on accessibility.
Thank you. You heard it. Wow, this was inspiring. Thank you so much. I think next we are ready for the Q&A session. So if you have questions and you're participating here in person, just raise your hand and Emma will come and pass the mic. And if you're participating remotely, you can post your questions to the chat and someone will read those from the chat.
Hi, sorry, I've lost my voice, so thank goodness for this accessible technology. There are product owners, I work in user experience, there are product owners who are, empathy is hard for them. But they definitely respond to money. And at my work, our accessibility director a few months ago shared a chart that proved the later in the process you involve accessibility, it gets exponentially more expensive, et cetera, et cetera. What are some resources, maybe some research or some sites that you might recommend that we can go to show some hard numbers to, bridge that conversation gap sometimes.
Well, I mean, right off the top of my head, I don't have any sites in mind, but I can definitely put together some resources. I love doing that kind of stuff, so I can do that. Just reach out to me on LinkedIn and I'll send it to you. But I would say that there's a couple of different kind of like monetary incentives that can also be argued. And you can look at things like innovation, different things that have been created for people with disabilities that are now huge innovation moneymakers, like even just the Segway, that personal mobility items have become, multi-million-dollar markets. That was created for people with disabilities. Siri, a voice assistant, all of these things are created from technology that was for people with disabilities. So I think there's many arguments, the cost of not including people with disabilities, as Gopal said. There's the innovation argument. There's the market share argument of, we have so many people that have disabilities. It depends on the country, but 15 to 20% of the general population, 37.8% of the working population. Working population has money. So if you're not building accessible technology, you're missing out on that money. And there's, the right thing argument. There's the we could get sued and lose money argument. So I think tailoring that to what your POs value and the kind of decisions that they already make. So if you know that they make decisions based on certain values and you can kind of like dig a little into some decisions that they've made in the past, you can find out what's important to them and you can find out how to speak directly to what they value and what they will respond to.
So if you find that they're risk averse, then the argument of losing money because you're sued may be more up their alley than, say, the other arguments that you mentioned.
Exactly.
For example. Okay.
If
Which motivation works?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say if somebody's really motivated by risk and money, then telling them it's the right thing to do is never going to work.
Something to add, Gopal or Simone?
No, I think Simone and Soren spoke on behalf of all three of us.
So choose your strategy. Okay, next one.
Hey everybody, firstly, thanks Reaktor for bringing this panel together, and thank all of you for educating us so much. So when I think about designing for accessibility, there's an approach that I've heard of. I think about sort of work that Microsoft did about 10 years ago, which is very much around the universalization of disability. So an example would be a parent who's holding a baby doesn't have access to their arms, and so sort of spreading the idea that all of us will experience a form of disability sometime in our lives or in our everyday lives. And so I guess my question is, to what degree is that approach, do you think, helpful, or I've heard hurtful to advancing design for accessibility? And just to give some context, I design for a business unit that is focused on the military. So at least on the surface, almost none of my users have disabilities. I say on the surface, but now they have disabilities, but of course they all use our products in very challenging environments, right? And so, I sort of want to know what you think about the universalization approach to design for disability.
I think it's a really foundational aspect that you have brought about. Accessible products, services are generally good products and services. As we say in so many walks of life, when we talk about education, we say a good teacher is an inclusive teacher. We have had so many research that says if you, in fact, put a ramp, for example, of course it's for people who use wheelchairs, but research has shown that more and more pregnant women, pushing up, yes, pregnant women, people pulling with strollers, with suitcases, everyone. It's a large part of the population or the segment of the population that uses it in addition to persons with disabilities. So it's absolutely right. A good product, an accessible product is overall a good product. And that's that's the basis of universal design, I think. That it's usable by a majority of people without any modification, and that's I think the basis of what we are talking today.
Yeah, for sure. So that's definitely the practicality and the basis of it. I think the practicality for getting to the heart of your question. So, for you in particular, or your particular question, that's fun because there's a population of people who, as you mentioned, do not either have a disability or whatever. When we think of this, I think we need to deconstruct a little bit disability, and where we may not see, there are, how I want to say this, there are invisible disabilities and cognitive disabilities, and even if they don't identify with those, at some point you do, right? And I'd be interested to understand, I don't know all the details, if they're, because of, I guess, what they're doing, that they have to be in the toppest of shape and this, that, other. But the challenging aspect of their jobs is hitting more into the temporary space of that universal design. My words are not coming. But in that temporary space, that bar that talks about, you're in a coffee shop, so it's too loud, which means that you can't hear. It's that. So that's the part I think you might want to hone in a little bit more on for the population in which that you're speaking of. But in the larger sense of the topic, they may not say and claim outwardly disability because that the population doesn't allow for that. That's not congratulated. It's not celebrated. It's like no, but that you're still developing something for people who have all kinds of disabilities, seen and unseen.
Yeah, I'm just going to follow that up with, I've actually been in your position. I worked as a subcontractor for the Department of Defense at the Joint Systems Integration Lab, and I was working on training products for pilots. And they were like, our pilots have perfect vision. None of them have disabilities. And I was like, that's great for you. But as we did research and testing, we uncovered that there were several times where they were doing these huge exercises and they would have the pilots doing something completely different. And one of the products that we created was being operated by basically anyone in the building they could pull in a warm body to operate a machine. So you had janitors, you had cooks, you had maintenance workers sitting there operating these training softwares that we were creating. And so we found the use case. We were like, well, when you do these huge training days, like, what about these people? And I think, Simone's right about the coffee shop thing. Like, when you put somebody in a battle position or you put somebody in a really stressful position, like if you have somebody working on an oil rig, like all of these like really tough jobs where they say like, oh, our people have perfect eyesight, they have to be physically able. Yeah, but you put them under stress. Like, why wouldn't you want to make it as cognitively easy to use as possible? Or you have somebody that's an immigrant that doesn't speak English as a first language. Why wouldn't you want to make it easy to understand? There could be a miscommunication. Like the whole thing of like the Hawaii missile crisis might have been a miscommunication because of how the UX was done. So it's just like there's so many examples we can pull from to say, you're not always right on that. Not everybody has a permanent disability, like you said, but sometimes these situations that you're putting people in that put them under stress can cause that temporary disability, can cause them to have stress or anxiety. So I think, that's also a good tack to take and to say, even sometimes you can find the use case for it. So I think the universal design argument is great. I also am a real big fan of personalization. Mm-hmm. So, what works for one person doesn't work for another. Like Gopal was saying, some people have a visual disability, some people have an auditory disability, some people have both. So something like I can't listen to my phone at full speed that some blind people do because I have a cognitive disability. And so I can't do the really fast speed of voiceover. I have to listen to it at like very normal speed. And I sometimes feel a little weird about that because I'm like, I'm not a power user, I guess. But you just have to be able to accommodate intersecting disabilities as well.
Okay, I'm going to ask a question from someone that's submitted virtually. What research practices do you implement to identify areas in need of more accessible design solutions?
Come again, one more time.
What research practices do you implement to identify areas in need of more accessible design solutions?
I'm going to keep mine short. I think the best feedback comes from things like if you have a customer complaint, having an accessibility statement on your website where people can reach out directly with accessibility complaints is a huge one. Also, just like setting up some interdepartmental lines of communication, like if you have a customer service department, how many issues are coming through there? That's one of the first things, because customers will tell you.
I also think too, your regular UX research methods that you're already doing, so generative research, usability testing, all of those types of things are things you're already doing. If you are doing any kind of research, it's just a matter of being intentional about developing your research questions and keeping in mind who you want to include and all of that. So it's already what you're doing, just having more focus on accessibility and or including those voices to get the feedback so you can make the inferences and find the gaps for accessibility.
And just to add, in a couple of our programs, in terms of digital products, we after it's deployed or this thing, from time to time, we also reach out to again because considering the diversity of disability, right, with different groups of persons with disabilities to again use and give us the experience, because many times we have seen a product is or a digital product is accessible to one group of persons with disabilities, not totally inaccessible to the other group and so on. So even it's very important to continuously remind us of that fact that this is a very, very diverse community, and we have to make as much effort as possible to ensure that that it is accessible to all types of persons with disabilities. Yeah.
Hi, this is Monica. I head accessibility at CVS Health. So I heard your question, and I just wanted to, because this is something we have learned in the last year or so. One of the things I would encourage you to do when it comes to that is, to your point, Simone, it's, you have to have people with disabilities on your design team. You're not, you can do your user research. You have organizations like FABO. You've got National Federation for the Blind as an organization. They will become the voices. They will provide you insights from there. And Microsoft has a great website for a lot of materials for accessibility that you will have. And lastly, 3 things. The chief compliance officer in your organization, the chief diversity officer in your organization, and head of your legal. Those are the 3 people, if you don't have buy-in from your own leadership, will give you the buy-in you need, because almost every organization has a legal challenge somewhere. Whether it's colleagues, whether it's consumers, because you may or may not have a direct consumer organization. I work for CVS, so it's a retail organization as well as digital. So that was just, I just thought, because I also had lead accessibility at disability.in. So these are a lot of the questions. So you'll find a lot of materials, a lot of training materials if anybody wants it from there. So I hope you guys, if you're starting small, Howard Johnson at J&J started small, and she's doing great. So you may reach out to her on LinkedIn as well, and she can help you out as well.
I love that. I want to just add one more thing there. If you can't, because Fable is something that you can pay for and other things like that. So if you're, we don't have resources. We talked about that. Okay. If you're in a company that has working groups, so, moms, of the company and, African Americans and et cetera, they all typically, they'd have a disability group as well tap into your peers, your colleagues that are part of that working group, and include them. Ask first, but include them along the way. And it's also a great place to showcase and to talk about what is happening, what you are doing, and how you're trying to make that change in the company. I do want to say though, if you're doing that, please do not mine for information and not give back to said community. Please be careful about that. Be courteous about that. We are sharing, not mining. But that's also a resource to tap into. That's free, but does require clearly the work of communication and partnership and relationship building. So that's another one. Thank you so much for that.
Thank you. One more thing to add, or?
Yeah, it's very short. I just wanted to add on to what you said and say that a lot of people feel uncomfortable asking their customers, hey, do you have a disability? Don't ask about disability. Ask about the assistive tech they use. Do you use assistive tech? Do you use voiceover? Do you use a screen reader? Do you navigate the web using a keyboard? So questions like that can help your user research tap into, make sure that you have people with disabilities in your testing group from just your regular customer base. Then you don't have to go to an outside company and get like a specialty disability testing group or anything like that. You can just source from the customers you already have in your testing groups. But you're just making sure that you get a diverse group of candidates. And there's nothing wrong with testing mostly with people with disabilities, because people without disabilities can use the same technology. So build it once, build it right.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you so much, Simone, Soren, Gopal. This has been a blast, and we can maybe continue later with the drinks. But thank you, everyone, for joining and listening the past hour. It's been very inspiring. Thank you.